Is he asleep?
No. I'm pretty sure he's dead.
Getting kind of bored.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
Oh my god!
What's up, everyone? I hope y'all are doing great. The Minato one-shot came out recently, and it was really good. I'm happy to report that Kishimoto is still him. I really missed his art style, his writing, and his characterization. I also loved seeing more of Kushina and Jiraiya. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but this is not a review of the one-shot per se. The one-shot had a lot of interesting power scaling implications, and yeah, I'm sorry to all y'all Minato haters out there, but Minato definitely stomps Hashirama now. I mean, this was always kind of the case if we're all being honest, but it's absolutely undeniable now with Kuruma's statement. It's just an open and shut case, and no one can deny it now. In my opinion, Minato still loses to Hashirama, and in this video, I'm going to be explaining exactly why that is. Before I get into the nitty gritty of it all, I do want to make a few things clear. First off, despite what that intro may lead you to believe, I'm not some big Minato hater or anything. I actually like Minato a lot, and I do believe he's a very powerful character as well. So I promise that I'll try to be as impartial and as fair in my assessment as I can possibly be. Second of all, this video will primarily be discussing how I personally believe Minato fares against Hashirama, especially when we take all the new information we got from the new one-shot manga into consideration. This will only be my personal opinion at the end of the day, so if you find yourself disagreeing with anything, that's totally okay. To be clear, I'm only going to be covering these guys in their prime while alive. So I'm going to be using alive Hoekage Minato and alive Hashirama. No Edo Tensei shenanigans this day. We can maybe cover those debates another time if y'all are interested. Finally, before I get into how I see this fight playing out, I feel like it's best to do a scaling overview for each character, just to establish how powerful I believe each one of them is. I won't go super in depth here. I can maybe do that another time if y'all want. So, without further ado, let's get into this. So, starting off with the Yellow Flash, I suppose it only makes sense for us to address the elephant in the room. Minato's new one-shot manga has a number of things that could massively inflate his power level if we take them out of context. In this subsection, I'm going to be explaining why these new developments are maybe not quite as impressive as one may initially believe. Out of all the statements and feats present in this chapter, I feel like this will probably be the most divisive. Kurama pretty much compares Minato's prowess to Hashirama's once he sees his ability to reinforce the Uzumaki seal that's binding him. In my personal opinion, the context here is clearly pointing towards this being a skill comparison, specifically their sealing prowess, rather than a straight up power comparison. Now, I understand that a statement like this can easily be interpreted in a number of different ways, but that's why we use context clues to derive a more logical conclusion. In the coming sections, it will become abundantly clear just why Minato scaling to Hashirama will make a whole lot of sense when looking at the overall scaling of these characters. So while this interpretation isn't objective by any means, and one could feasibly use this statement in a vacuum to say that Minato is equal to Hashirama in terms of raw power, I hope that by the end of this power scaling section, you'll see that it's simply the most logically sound interpretation. Besides, we shouldn't always take statements like these at face value, or else we'll end up with stuff like Itachi being stronger than Hashirama, which, yeah, it doesn't quite work. So, at the end of the day, context is king. Oh boy, here's the big one. Y'all know this was coming. So yeah, Minato's Rasengan clashed with Kuruma's Biju Bomb towards the end of the chapter, and it's an impressive and visually striking moment, no doubt about it. A lot of people's knee-jerk reaction was to say that Minato scales to Kuruma due to this feat. However, and I really hate to be the party pooper here, but people are also missing a lot of important context. For starters, this clash took place inside Kushina's mental plane, and the stuff that takes place in there can be pretty dubious if we're being honest. Like, we have stuff like the Eight-Tails arm catching Kuruma's Biju Bomb, turning into an Eight-Tails head, and then eating the bomb and containing the explosion. Now, outside of the obvious logical issues with this, we know for a fact that Eight-Tails is normally not on Kuruma's level. He's more so a rival to the other Biju, meanwhile Kurama can casually manhandle them and even match a charged Biju bomb created by 5 Biju at the same time. Then we have Sage Mode Naruto somewhat battling Kurama in there as well, which is equally weird since we know that Sage Naruto is weaker than KCM Naruto, which is a form that only utilizes a fraction of Kurama's total power. Now, all I'm trying to say is that the mental battles can be really wacky, and I believe they're somewhat unreliable, but if y'all want to say that it's a battle of chakra and ought to be used, then fine, let's use them. There's still another big issue to contend with here. Kurama was still sealed when all of this happened. This means that there's no solid way to prove that he was at full power here. Furthermore, both Minato and Kushina were individually strengthening the seal when the clash happened. Minato was reinforcing the seal from the outside, and Kushina was doing it from the inside with her chains. She even tightened her chains hold over Kurama right before Minato's Rasengan clashed with him. So Kurama was definitely not at his strongest here, at least in my opinion. I've seen the argument floating around that since enough of Kurama's chakra was leaked to make Kushina reach a version 2 cloak with at least 7 tails, then this version of Kurama should at least be that strong. And that argument seems fine to me in a vacuum. However, as far as Minato scaling is concerned, it pretty much decimates his chances of scaling since V2 Kushina gave my boy a Rin flash forward, if you catch my drift. So yeah, it goes without saying that Minato is physically weaker than V2 Kushina. One could say that only Minato's Rasengan would scale to the 7-tailed Kushina, and that's okay-ish. However, there's another issue here. Kurama's Biju Bomb wasn't even fully formed here. We directly see that Kurama was still in the process of charging it up, and Kushina herself later confirms that Kurama was only trying to use that technique, implying that it hadn't reached its completion yet. Now obviously there's still the mother of all anti-feats for Minato scaling to Kurama, and that's the fact that 50% Kurama went through both Minato and Kushina like a hot knife through butter. This alone ought to really kill any hope of Minato scaling anywhere near Kurama. You could maybe argue his Rasengan is somewhat close, but not close enough in my opinion. If he's not on Kurama's level, then just how strong is Minato? Yeah, this is a somewhat controversial topic within our fandom. Some people highball Minato to the moon and back, while many choose to take the opposite approach and downplay him very badly instead. Personally, I like to take a more balanced approach when it comes to Minato. The problem with him is that he doesn't have a ton of quantifiable on-screen feats, so most of his scaling is statement-based, but I think we definitely have enough to paint a coherent picture of just what the L-Flash is capable of. I'm gonna keep this very simple. Minato's main scaling comes from 2 places. One is him being generally above the likes of Orochimaru and old Hiruzen. Hiruzen implied that Minato would have been able to stop Orochimaru and that nobody currently in Konoha would be capable of stopping him, which also kinda puts Minato above old Hiruzen. This meta is even further supported when we look at the Ultimate Ninja Storm Generations game, where we had a Jonin Minato defeat the 3rd Hoekage well over a decade before his fight with Orochimaru. This is interesting because Orochimaru himself stated that if Hiruzen had been 10 years younger, he could have defeated him. Minato defeated an even younger Hiruzen than that, so him being stronger than Orochimaru is pretty well supported. Him being above Orochimaru and Hiruzen is even further backed by the fact that, generally speaking, the strongest shinobi in the village is selected for the title of Hoekage, and this is true for other villages as well. There are occasionally some exceptions, like Naruto for example, but they're just that, exceptions. Also worth noting that Hiruzen had a reputation for being the strongest of the 5 Kage. And while this was likely when he was younger, it's still pretty relevant here since Minato also scales to a much younger Hiruzen. Hiruzen also uses Monkey King Enma in combat, and can take attacks from those capable of harming Enma, such as weakened Edo Hashirama and Tobirama. This is relevant because Enma was stated to be the strongest summoning creature in the first fanbook. This would put Enma above the likes of Gamabunta, who can fight Shukaku. This pretty much is a long-winded way of me saying that Minato is pretty solidly Biju level. Speaking of Biju level, it wouldn't be a Minato scaling section without mentioning Minato's most solid scaling by far. Minato pretty objectively scales to the 4th Raikage, which further solidifies his Biju level scaling. The Raikage is the strongest combatant in his village, which in the 4th's case would include the perfect Jinchuriki Killer Bee and Yuki. He was also shown to hurt Yuki when he was much younger, and was just stated verbatim to be Biju level in his lightning armor. A himself stated that he and Minato traded blows on many occasions, and that he was the finest shinobi he's ever encountered, which would once again include the likes of Killer Bee and even his father, the third Hoekage, who also had a plethora of Bijou level scaling. The Raws for the A statement make it even more clear that he was saying that no shinobi surpassed Minato at all, which supports it being a power statement as opposed to a skill statement or something along those lines. Minato was also portrayed as a threat to the Hoekage in the only encounter we did see. And honestly, it wouldn't make much sense for their rivalry to exist if Minato couldn't even scratch A. So yeah, as you can see, Minato being in the Bijou level spectrum is rather solid. Now moving on to speed, which is Minato's bread and butter, and honestly it's pretty simple. Minato was stated in the databook to be as fast as the 4th Hoekage, who was the fastest shinobi in the world by the time of the 4th Shinobi World War. This would put the Hoekage's full speed above quite a lot of people, but most notably, he's comparable in speed to the likes of KCM Naruto, and even Madara was impressed by his speed. He was also able to dodge Sasuke's Amaterasu, which is pretty insane because it spawns directly onto what Sasuke is looking at, meaning the Hoekage outsped Sasuke's perception in that moment. An impressive feat given the Sharingan's ability to clearly perceive and predict fast-moving objects. A himself also reiterated the fact that Minato was his rival in speed, and even implied that he may have been his superior. Another notable speed feat is that Minato is faster than Hashirama and Tobirama using the body flicker, and was even praised by Tobirama for his speed. Minato's reactions are also rather impressive, as he can react to the Hoekage's full speed at point-blank range, and can react to attacks from Jubidara as an Edo Tensei. So yeah, overall Minato's a beast, man. He's pretty much a high-tier Bijou level character in Ippei, and a top tier in terms of speed. Definitely no joke. Now, let's take a look at his stamina. And yeah, it's really good. During the Night of the Ninetales attack, he used around a dozen flying Raijin in addition to Guiding Thunder, the Rasengan, and the Summoning Jutsu where he summoned Gamabunta before he started getting exhausted and being low on chakra. He also had brief skirmishes with Obito in between, but they were not long enough to really affect his stamina all that much on their own. But yeah, even after he stated that his chakra was running low, he was still able to use both the Reaper Death Seal as well as the 8-Sign Seal in order to completely seal Kurama away. He was also able to seal away parts of his and Kushina's consciousness within Naruto. He did most of this while suffering from Kurama fully impaling him, so his pain tolerance and endurance are also off the charts. This was always the case, to be honest, as he was able to continue suppressing Kurama even after V2 Kushina impaled him when he was much younger. As for Minato's arsenal, it's quite impressive. His crown jewel is obviously the Flying Raijin. Using that jutsu, he can teleport himself to any location where he has special formulas placed. He usually uses kunai that have formulas inscribed onto them, and spreads them across the battlefield. He can even teleport to the kunai's location while they're still in motion. Minato can also place the formulas onto other objects or even people in order to teleport to them directly. It's also possible for him to teleport objects or people that he's making contact with, so he can essentially BFR attacks or enemies away if he so chooses. He also has a technique called Guiding Thunder, which allows him to create a space-time barrier that teleports away anything that it comes into contact with, to a marked location of his choosing. His BFR abilities can work on absolutely massive attacks, such as Bijou Bomb from Kurama or even the Ten Tails. Another one of Minato's signature jutsu is the Rasengan, which is a sphere of concentrated chakra that he can use to harm opponents comparable to himself. The Rasengan can also do some internal damage to an extent, so it's a very powerful finisher move. Minato also has access to a lot of powerful utility techniques, such as the Shadow Clone Jutsu and the Summoning Technique, which he can use to summon powerful toads such as Gamabunta. Finally, Minato is one of the best Fun Jutsu users in the series, and has access to many powerful sealing jutsu. He mastered many of the Uzumaki techniques taught to him by Kushina, which had the power to seal and bind the power of entities as powerful as Kurama. He also had access to the Reaper Death Seal, which can seal the souls of its target, or a part of it, but at the cost of the user's own soul being sealed alongside it for all eternity. He can also use the 8-Sign Seal, which is also capable of sealing away the likes of Kurama. Overall, his arsenal is absolutely incredible, and combined with his insane skill and genius level intellect, it becomes clear why this guy had a run-on-site order placed against him. Alright, now moving on to Big Wood. I'll try to keep it simple. I'll go over how powerful he is physically, and then I'll go over his power level with wood release, as I believe it's quite different. Physically, even a heavily weakened Edo Hashirama was able to harm Enma and Hiruzen, which already puts him in the Beedrill level spectrum as we went over before. When Hashirama was revived closer to his full strength, he was stated by Orochimaru to be on a completely different level, in that he could break free of his control at any point, which is extra impressive because this version of Orochimaru had enhanced his binding power using Hashirama's own cells. Hashirama is also every bit as powerful as Madara, even in base. As for how powerful Madara is, I'll briefly go over the most relevant bits. Even as a weakened Edo, he was able to take hits from the 4th Hoekage, which already puts him at Beedrill level. Then when he was revived and absorbed Hashirama's Senjutsu chakra, he was able to withstand a flurry of attacks from the Beedrill with little to no damage, at least from their physical blows. Now, it should be noted that Hashirama stated that Madara was regaining his past strength after he absorbed his Senjutsu, meaning that EMS Alive Madara should scale to those feats as well. Hashirama obviously scales to this since he fought Madara countless times, and was the only one to defeat him on a number of occasions during their lifetime. So yeah, Hashirama has some pretty solid physical scaling to the Biju. On top of that, he can also greatly enhance his physical capabilities beyond that with Sage Mode. All in all, Hashirama is a beast, man, definitely one of the physically strongest people in this series before we start looking at 6 best level characters and beyond. As for his wood release, he has some incredibly powerful techniques such as his Wood Dragon, which is capable of restraining full power Kurama. His Wood Golem is also stated to be just as powerful as Kurama, which was proven when it caught his Beedrill Bomb with ease. It was also able to fight Madara's perfect Susanoo when both of them were Edo Tensei. Hashirama can also create wood barriers that can withstand Kurama's Beedrill Bombs. So yeah, all around, his wood release in base is more or less around Ninetales level. This is also the case even as a weakened Edo Tensei, since he stated that he has more chakra than 50% Kurama and Naruto combined, which is absolutely insane because Naruto at this point was fighting the incomplete Jubi, Madara, and Obito while simultaneously sharing his chakra with thousands of shinobi. As powerful as he already is, Hashirama's techniques reach a whole new level when he enters Sage Mode. He was capable of single-handedly maintaining the Crimson Formation Barrier, which can withstand and contain the Ten-Tails Beedrill Bomb. His Deity Gates, which are powered by his Senjutsu chakra, were capable of pinning down and restraining Ten-Tails as well. They also tanked his Beedrill Bomb without getting damaged. As insane as all of this is already, none of it really compares to his ultimate technique, the Shinsu Senju. This Chad among Chads just spawns a massive Buddha statue with 1,000 arms that dwarfs both the mountains nearby as well as the majestic attire Susanoo, which is basically Kurama wearing Madara's perfect Susanoo as armor. Given how massive these two are individually, the Shinsu Senju's scale is just truly awe-inspiring, and its power does not disappoint. Its 1,000 arms were able to match the majestic attire's evil disturbance waltz, which is basically Madara spamming countless Beedrill Bombs with perfect Susanoo blades stuck in them in very quick succession. The arms even managed to reach the attire through that flurry and chipped away a large portion of the Susanoo's armor, leaving Kurama exposed. It's also worth noting that this clash was largely responsible for the formation of the Valley of the End, so its destructive capacity is such that it can permanently alter the landscape, which seems to have been a staple of Madara and Hashirama's battles, as per Madara himself. The Buddha statue itself is so gargantuan and powerful that it can effortlessly grab and manhandle Kurama as if he were a tiny kitten. It's truly mind-blowing how powerful this technique actually was. Speed-wise, the simplest and most straightforward route to scale Hashirama is Madara. I'll go more in depth when discussing the actual battle. In terms of stamina, Hashirama is an absolute monster. Even in base, he has more chakra than Naruto and 50% Kurama combined, and it goes without saying how massive their respective chakra reserves are. He can also battle Madara for 24 hours straight, which is insane because Madara is his equal, so it's a day of intense fighting, not breezing through jobbers or something along those lines. Finally, I'd like to do a quick overview of Hashirama's skills and jutsu arsenal. Obviously the most notable ability in his arsenal is Wood Release, which he uses to spawn massive quantities of wood and trees. This includes entire forests, giant barriers, massive wooden dragons, big wooden arms, and a giant wooden humanoid, among many others. Using Deep Forest Emergence, he can also create flowers that release a pollen which renders those who inhale them unconscious. His wood release also has many special properties. Chief among them is its ability to suppress the power of those it restrains. Many people think this is exclusive to the Biju, and while it is certainly super effective against them, it actually works on others as well. His wood release also has the ability to absorb chakra from those it restrains, and he can make small variants of this technique and restrain humanoid targets with it. Another amazing trick up his sleeve is his wood clones. They're just like shadow clones, but are nearly impossible to distinguish from the original, and are even more durable. They can also merge with the surrounding vegetation to avoid detection, among other things. Hashirama is also well versed in sealing jutsu. Askurama directly compared his prowess in them to Minato's, who had learned and mastered many Uzumaki sealing techniques. This actually makes sense, since Hashirama was also married to an Uzumaki, so it's likely that Miru taught him these techniques in the same way that Kushina taught Minato. Sage Hashirama also has access to one of the most powerful sealing jutsu ever seen in the series, the Gracious Deity Gates. These gates have the ability to match the size and power of their target. They completely bind and restrict movement, sealing away the target's very will to resist the technique, which was powerful enough to bind Madara and even the Ten Tails. Additionally, Hashirama is a sensory type ninja, and can sense chakra to locate targets from vast distances. He also has some genjutsu prowess, most notably with his Bringer of Darkness technique, which essentially inflicts darkness upon the target's eyesight, basically making them blind. Last but certainly not least, Hashirama has the gift of being able to rapidly heal any injury inflicted upon him. His healing ability was likened to Tsunade's, and was even implied to be superior to her mitotic regeneration, which can instantly regenerate any lost limbs or organs, making them both essentially immortal. Of course Hashirama has other abilities, but this is not a dedicated Hashirama video, so I just went over the most prominent and relevant bits. Now that we went over their respective levels of power, as well as their arsenals, it's time to go over how this hypothetical fight should go. First off, I believe that in terms of physical strength, they're actually pretty close. Both have pretty solid Biju level scaling, as we went over before. One could maybe argue that Hashirama is slightly stronger physically, but in my opinion it's not really a difference that would drastically change the outcome of the fight. However, once he enters Sage Mode, I do believe that Hashirama would have a noticeable physical advantage. Now, of course Minato can also use Sage Mode himself, but he does admit that he's not very good at it, and it takes him a while to collect nature energy. It's already hard enough as it is to enter Sage Mode in combat, so Minato's ineffectiveness with the form makes it very unlikely that he'll successfully use it in combat, or that he'll even attempt it in the first place. Hashirama on the other hand has shown to enter Sage Mode pretty quickly and effortlessly, and he has the distinct advantage of being able to stand still atop one of his wood constructs while he builds his Senjutsu chakra. This means he can continue fighting while he builds up Sage Mode, which is an advantage very few have. So yeah, base to base, I think they're overall pretty close, with Hashirama having the advantage in Sage Mode. Now, speed. Yeah, this is where things get a bit dicey for me, but here goes. Now, I do believe that Minato is faster than Hashirama, but I genuinely don't think it matters at all. As we went over before, Minato's best and most consistent speed scaling is to the Hoekage. People always get offended when someone says that he just scales to the Hoekage, but it's genuinely his only quantifiable scaling, and his best one at that. Now, the Hoekage was faster than Edo Madara, yes, but Madara still managed to react to him and blocked his attack at point blank range. He was also able to fight the Hoekage for hours on end. Obviously, Alive Madara would at least be slightly faster than his Edo self, and Hashirama would scale to him. The point is that the likes of Hashirama can handle Minato level speed just fine, even if they're somewhat slower themselves. It should also be noted that Tobirama was faster than both Madara and Hashirama in their primes, and even had Flying Raijin in his arsenal, but he was still considered inferior to both of them. So in my opinion, a speed advantage that wouldn't result in some sort of speed blitz just won't make that much of a difference. It's definitely an advantage that Minato has, but it won't decide the outcome of this fight on its own in my opinion. Minato's reactions are still worth noting though. He can react to the Hoekage at point blank range and can even react to Jubi Madara's orbs. Very impressive stuff, and I can certainly see that it's enough to react to anything that Hashirama throws his way. But it should be noted that reacting to Madara's truth-seeking orbs isn't the same as reacting to Madara himself, Earlier on, we saw that Madara casually just shat on Minato completely, and in Sage mode no less. So yeah, again, definite advantage, but I don't see it deciding this fight. Okay, so if strength and speed won't decide this, then what will? In my opinion, it'll be their arsenals and their stamina. I think it's abundantly clear that while Minato's stamina is rather good, he's no match for Hashirama in this regard. Minato was already gassed out and pretty low on chakra in what likely amounts to less than an hour, after only using Flying Raijin roughly 11 times, in addition to other jutsu like the Rasengan, Guiding Thunder, and the Summoning Jutsu. He also had brief scuffles with Obito here and there. This isn't bad stamina by any means, and he still managed to seal away Kurama afterwards, even doing so through grievous injuries. Minato's stamina, endurance, and pain tolerance are actually excellent, but we're comparing him to a character who has one of the largest chakra reserves in the entire series. Someone who can battle the likes of Madara for an entire day non-stop. It's just a different level. Hashirama also has the ability to stand still and recover using his healing powers, or using Senjutsu chakra to replenish his reserves, while having his wood constructs do the fighting for him, which is a massive advantage. Speaking of his healing abilities, it's pretty unlikely that Minato would even be able to deal a lethal blow to this guy. He simply lacks the necessary AP to do enough damage to kill Hashirama through his regen. So even if he gets some damage through the Rasengan or a kunai, Hashirama will simply recover. Hashirama can also overwhelm Minato in many ways and gas him out. He can overwhelm him using his wood clones or through his massive wood constructs such as Deep Forest Emergence or the Shinsu Senju. The sheer range and scope of Hashirama's jutsu makes it so Minato simply has no option but to use Flying Raijin to escape the battlefield entirely. If he doesn't, he'll simply get clipped by something and die. As we know, he doesn't really fare too well against Kurama level attacks, let's be honest, and Hashirama can spam those pretty comfortably. So even though Minato would be able to react to the attacks and teleport to a nearby marking, it won't matter, because Hashirama can literally nuke the entire battlefield and change the entire landscape, which would include all the nearby spots that Minato marked. So unless he entirely retreats outside of Hashirama's range, which would essentially amount to forfeiting the battle anyway, he simply dies. The fact that he has to deal with all of this bullshit while potentially outnumbered, blinded, unable to breathe, and massively outgunned, while also being likely unable to do any permanent damage to Hashirama anyway, makes me really question Minato's chances of winning this thing. Even if we assume that Minato can avoid being tagged for a while, Hashirama will absolutely outlast him and eventually get the job done. So yeah, I'm pretty convinced that Hashirama should win this thing pretty comfortably, to be honest. Before I end this video, there are some arguments I commonly see for Minato that I'd like to address real quick. First up, a lot of people like to scale Minato to 50% Kurama because he and Kushina quote-unquote stopped his momentum and matched his kinetic energy. They also argue that since Minato was low on chakra in this moment, then Kurama's skewering him shouldn't really be a valid anti-feat. I personally disagree with that line of thinking. The feat of them stopping Kurama really shouldn't be attributed to Minato on his own, since Kushina's chains, which were already capable of completely stopping Kurama on their own, had tightened their hold on him in that moment. So one could easily argue that they did most of the heavy lifting here. In fact, I think it's pretty likely that they did, or at least heavily contributed towards doing so. Even if you take the feat to its highest possible interpretation, then Minato only scales to around 25% of Kurama's full power, since the feat was performed by two people simultaneously. So even at its best, it still falls short of what Hashirama can dish out with his casual wood release. As for Minato being low on chakra, like, sure, he wasn't at his best, and one could argue that this particular showing doesn't objectively limit him, but it goes both ways. He doesn't have any real feats that would put him on Kurama's level either, so just because his anti-feat may be a little dubious, doesn't mean y'all don't still need proof that he does scale. Absence of anti-feats isn't evidence of him scaling, it means nothing on its own. Next up is Minato's BFR. It's awesome, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it'll help him all that much in this fight. Let's start with Guiding Thunder. It's very powerful, but it's not gonna help against Hashirama because he can simply dish out way too many attacks. Minato will be able to BFR one or two of the Shinsu Senju's arms, but what about the other 999, you know? Hashirama spam is simply way too much. As for Minato simply touching an attack or a wood construct and teleporting it away with Flying Raijin, that would maybe work on some stuff, but it has its limitations. For starters, Minato teleports anything that makes direct or indirect contact with himself or his chakra. Hashirama is usually in direct contact with many of his wood constructs, such as the Golem, the Buddha, or even his Deep Forest Emergence, among others. So all Minato would be doing here is teleporting both himself and Hashirama somewhere else alongside the wood construct, essentially changing absolutely nothing aside from the scenery. Again, he can run away to another place, but that wouldn't really help him win the fight and would just be a concession on his part, so it would be Hashirama's win anyway. Then there's the idea that Minato can maybe use Flying Raijin to blitz and one-shot Hashirama. I don't know about that one, to be honest. Like, again, Tobirama had the ability to do the exact same thing and was always considered inferior to his older brother and Madara. Hell, we directly saw Madara avoid Tobirama's Flying Raijin slice using his Sage Mode enhanced senses, so at the very least, Sage Hashirama will be able to counter Minato's teleportation blitz. And even if he suffers some damage in base, he'll easily regenerate like I mentioned previously. Also, his frequent use of clones as well as his knowledge of Flying Raijin will make it pretty likely to substitute out of any of Minato's attempts to place a sealing formula on him, and potentially catch him off guard. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think that in this particular battle, Hashirama comes out on top pretty comfortably. Kurama Mode Minato is probably more fair and is a much better debate. We can maybe cover that one another time. For now though, that's about all I've got. Please share your thoughts on who wins this battle of Hoekage. Like and subscribe if you want more videos like this, and yeah, see y'all in the next one.
Bye bye!